Episode 2. Right. Mik Scarlet gave me a lot of leads to look into. He is a genuinely kind person that wants to help other humans. He even opened up about his own challenging past, so I can now see that this planet is capable of operating on love, peace, and harmony, like the rest of the universe can. But something's amiss here, and I'm now investigating a new potential lead, philosopher Nina Power. I believe this human might provide me with insights on how and why humans form societies, whether humans are inherently evil or not, and why societies aren't always helpful to Mik Scarlet and his cause. I've prolonged my journey on Earth, specifically in London, and after bumping into Mik Scarlet, who I'm sure you've met in the previous episode, I've decided to embark on a different adventure, and today I've met this lovely philosopher called Nina Power. She's a senior editor at Compact magazine, and she also teaches at the Mary Ward Centre. And I'd like to hear this lovely human's perspective on good and evil, which we briefly spoke about with Mick.
Well, first of all, welcome to our planet. I don't know how long you've been here, but I hope you appreciate the tea, at least. And, well, good and evil. I suppose these are ideas or myths or religious thoughts or moral thoughts that human beings have been having for a very long time. Although perhaps in our era, good and evil are not so popular as ideas. They may be seen as a bit archaic, a bit old-fashioned, but I would say that they have a very deep significance, even in a modern era. I don't know if modernity makes any sense to an alien, but I suppose these very profound questions about whether we are good, whether we're fundamentally able to be good, even if we're flawed, or even because we're flawed, because we can decide different things. We have the capacity to choose better or worse options, whether it's towards ourselves or towards other people. We're fundamentally social, but we're all capable of harm. We're all capable of hurting each other as well, and hurting ourselves. And I suppose a lot of the major religions all understand this tension, that we are fundamentally split. But perhaps today, this split is often presented as if it belongs to entire groups of people. So there are good people over here and then there are bad people over there. And if you say that people are bad because they have the wrong views or whatever, then you're allowed to hate them and you can say whatever you like about them. But I think this is a sort of mistake, because good and evil are fundamentally part of who we all are and don't just belong to groups, and certainly not in this black and white way. So I suppose if I had to define good and evil for the purposes of explaining it to an alien, I would try to say that good is perhaps the capacity to put things in order and to make the world a better place, and to be motivated by positive feelings and emotions such as love, which would be central to something like Christianity, for example. And evil would be on the side of not doing what you're supposed to do, perhaps on the side of chaos, on the side of darkness, confusion, incomprehensibility. And I got very interested in these questions in the last sort of few years because it seemed that we'd forgotten to have this kind of collective discussion, and that people were acting as if they already understood what these concepts meant.
Okay, well, as I'm just briefly passing through, I'm still very confused, and I'm in the dark, and I'm not comprehending any of this social structure that I seem to be wandering through. But does that make me subject to evil?
Well, this is a very good question. I think the world is a very confusing place, actually, and I think without kind of clear moral guidelines, one of the features of the current time we live in, I suppose, is the idea that we can all make up our own mind, we can all decide our own morality. So really, I could say to you, well, you're here now, it's up to you. How do you feel? If we have a morality that's based on your desire, you might say, well, I want to collect gold, I want to eat donuts, I want to, hurt other people. We might have some restrictions on some of those, but not all of them. So I think it is very confusing, and I think the reason why lots of previous moral and religious systems in particular had tended to have rules was because it's easier to follow rules than to try to come up with them yourself. But because the modern age is very protective of an idea of freedom, or a very particular idea of freedom, we tend to think that freedom is the freedom to do whatever we want without constraint. Whereas earlier human beings thought that freedom was actually the liberation from addiction and desire, and actually it was about understanding that you shouldn't be at the mercy of these things, and we've sort of turned it around, and now we think that desire is good.
So let me get this straight. When I spoke to Mick, obviously he referred to me as alien, not because that's the term for me, but because I'm an outsider. And also we spoke about alienation and being weird in a good and a bad way, and Mick defined himself as weird because he's quirky and interesting and different. But here's the thing, if I have this desire to get rid of your government, which I think makes people like Mick suffer, wouldn't I be doing good then?
Well, yeah, this is a very interesting question from a lot of political theorists, whether you have the right to rebel or not. If you have a tyrannical government, indeed, who perhaps have turned their back on the good, does the population have the right to rebel, right? Because the order itself has been disturbed or disrupted, or the government or the monarch is acting in a tyrannical manner. And this is in many ways one of the central questions of political philosophy. So yes, and it's very important, I think, to understand that even at the same time as we have this kind of consumerist desire and everybody should express themselves and so on, you also have really an expanded definition of extremism going on. So potentially anyone who has the wrong view could be in quite a lot of trouble. And as somebody, I've been involved in lots of activism in my life, and now I write things in public that are sometimes perceived to be controversial. And, I was recently contacted by a particular government organisation because of some tweets I'd written, criticising the anti-extremism strategy. And of course, this stuff is terrifying. You're literally getting contact. It's like a Kafka novel. I don't know if you have Kafka on your planet, but really this extraordinary. And it turned out it was a unit that was actually trying to see if the government guidance on prevent this anti-extremism strategy that we're all supposed to learn, because if we're dealing with the public, so if we're a teacher, if we work at any kind of public institute, we all have to undergo this training, and the training is to see if somebody has become radicalized, right? To see if, and then we have to report them, right? So we're operating as a kind of spy network. Anyway, so I did this training because I'm also part-time teacher, and I tweeted about it jokingly. I said, this is ridiculous. Look at the examples. And I was kind of mocking it. And then the next day I got this email. But it turned out it was from a unit that was basically set up to almost criticize the prevent government training. So they weren't telling me off in the sense of saying, you're not allowed to talk about this training. It was almost like they were checking up on the guidance that another part of the government had implemented. So it was all very confusing. It was like there was confusion at the top, and confusion, as I've already said, is on the side of evil generally. So confusion can be very productive, but I think if people want to encourage confusion, they generally have bad motives for doing so.
I think, I don't know, so far it's all a little bit sinister. So far what I've observed is that you humans like to put yourself in boxes all the time. Boxes for schools, boxes for governments, boxes for styles, fashions, boxes for genders, boxes for identities, and now I'm finding out that there's a new box that you've created for anti-extremism and all that. Is this all coming from a bigger evil, like capitalism, or the desire to just control from the top?
Yeah, it's a very good question, because on the one hand, I'm saying that good and order are associated, and you would have thought that maybe putting things in order in this way is a good thing. But I would say there's a form of bureaucracy, or like you say, boxes, kind of trying to control society, trying to almost extract data from people, to spy on people, to sell them things. So that is not on the side of good, right? That this is actually, like you say, it's a form of, categorization and sort of putting people in boxes. Yes, so this isn't the good order. This is like a bad order. And I think that it's partly capitalist. I think it's partly about creating new markets and getting people to identify in particular ways, so they identify with particular kind of consumerist subjects and so on. Definitely, there are new markets to be made, right? You can exploit people's desire for belonging and, their loneliness and so on, and their desire for recognition by selling them certain things. And so it's definitely partly this. And also, but I think the relationship of the government in this and this kind of control is, I don't know, it's a human tendency. It will never go away either, this desire to sort of control other people. But they are related, but I can't really tell you how. It's a very complicated question.
So this is interesting, because we did discuss this with Mik as well. One human decided to control another, and I don't know, but you surely must realize that you humans are made of titanium, carbon, oxygen, and all of these other elements that are formed in stars. So you essentially, one composition of stars wanting to control another composition of stars, but together you can all be part of something very beautiful and bright and positive.
Well, that's true. I mean, I don't know why we forget that we are all made of stars and that we are kind of cosmic beings. I mean, this is true. I mean, from a certain vantage point, there's no real difference between us. We're all connected. We're all made of the same material. Yet, nevertheless, I suppose there are all of these artificial divisions. Well, some of them, they're artificial in a certain way, but they're very real in others. So obviously, some human beings have a lot more money than others.
I know what money is now. Mick taught me money is that weird green paper, which coincidentally is also made of carbon. So some of you humans have more carbon than others, and you think that having more carbon means more control and power.
Well, at this point, it's not even paper. I mean, it's not even real. It's just numbers in a machine. But I mean, yes, we our social convention, I suppose, is such that we all agree, whether we like it or not, that this is something real. And yes, some human beings have a lot more numbers than others.
I see. So tell me about how you control your desire and try and avoid to be part of the system, because it sounds like you're rebelling against it.
Well, I don't know. I mean, it's sometimes the more you oppose the system, the more you end up kind of supporting it. So it's very difficult to untangle oneself. We're all here. We're all related in some ways. We're all in the same place. I think one must be able to laugh at oneself. I think this is fundamental. Because after all, many of the things that we want are actually quite ridiculous. And it's far better to sort of, I don't know, accept in a kind of whimsical way. I don't know if you understand this word, but like a light-hearted way.
Yeah.
Oh, good. You know, to be whimsical and funny about things rather than get too serious about anything in particular. But I think it is a constant battle, actually. I think probably to be able to look after oneself, to have enough money, to have somewhere to live, to not give in to, bad thoughts or bad patterns of behaviour is very difficult. I think being human is quite difficult, actually. And people want to think it's easy, but it's not.
No, I think so. I think some humans, as I stumbled upon, like to position themselves on top of other species, which I find a bit absurd. You're all here in this together on this planet to work it out, really. But anyway, so I was going through some theory, something that humans seem to have invented. And I've stumbled upon some very, very, very complicated terms. One of them is so long, you're gonna have to break it down for me. Instrumentalization. It has a funny sound to it.
Sounds like an instrument itself. Well, I suppose the way I would understand instrumentalization is turning something into a tool, something that you can use. And obviously there are tools, because human beings are using animals, right? So we have spoons to stir things and hammers to hammer nails in, and railway tracks to have trains on. And, we're a very inventive species. Like we've colonized the whole planet.
Very crafty.
What?
Very crafty.
Crafty, indeed. Very good. And so, we one way that we have of looking at the world is to see it as something we can use. This is obviously has its dark side, because if we start thinking about everything in this instrumental terms, making everything into a tool, we could also do this to human beings. And obviously human beings do still engage in slavery in parts of the world. They do still sell organs or body parts, or sell their bodies, and the system in a way doesn't necessarily render those things immoral or even illegal in some cases. So we know that we can treat other people as tools, even though something maybe in us should rebel at that, because we would like to think also that people have their own purpose and their own soul and their own meaning, and that they shouldn't be reduced to being used. But I think it's a particular way of seeing the world. If you think of everything as something that can be used, then unfortunately that also means that everything can be used up, and that we're quite likely to use everything up, if we don't pull back from this way of seeing everything as a kind of tool. And it's not the only way we can see the world. We could also see the world in a contemplative way. We could sort of accept the world. We don't have to keep bashing it up and making things and mining things and discovering things. We're very caught between these two antagonisms, really, of wanting to act and wanting to not act. And I think many human beings have gone down the acting route, which can be very destructive.
I agree. So for your however many rotations you've done around the sun, is there a period I see, is there a period or an era or an epoch you would probably have liked to belong to instead of this one?
Ooh. Interesting. It's impossible, I think, to imagine going back to a period and not ending up in the same place that we are in now, because there seems something almost that follows from one invention to another. But I think I would probably like to have been in ancient Greece when human beings started thinking properly.
Oh, yes. Okay.
Or at least in a certain way, let's not say properly. They started thinking in a particular way that involved trying to make arguments in dialogue with each other.
When humans became critical of their existence.
Not even critical, but yes, sometimes they were. But I suppose just trying to ask these quite strange questions, like what is everything made of, and that's kind of scientific also, but it's not just scientific. It's a kind of philosophical question. How should we live? What's the best way of organising man? What is beauty? What is the good? These kind of big questions first got asked, or at least in a way that we know they did because they were recorded. So.
Oh, I see. But later on, though, other humans after the ancient Greeks, they started to categorize the ancient Greeks into different schools of thought. So, do you think, where do you put the social classes issue? at? Do you think it started from them or later on? Why do you think it exists? And why should it exist? Why can't you all be equal?
Well, yes. I mean, I think from what we understand of the human record, the class system goes very deep. Different formulations, different ways, but something like slavery is very old, for example. The use of other human beings to build things and to treat them as tools. This is one of the complicated issues, because really the idea of equality comes a lot later. It doesn't mean that there weren't systems, I think, where people didn't have a place. Like, if you had a place, maybe in some ways this was a comforting life. This was a different kind of life. You didn't have to come up with your own idea of freedom, your own idea of what the good and evil is. But you had a role and you had a position and you had a status. But of course, this is unfair in some ways if you don't want to stay in your place. So human beings are always fighting, I think, between hierarchy and equality as well. There's another antagonism we have.
Yes, where I'm from, we did discuss this antagonism, as you call it, how one composition of starry stuff treats and exploits another composition of starry stuff, and it's all the same, and it should be all the same. Everywhere else in the galaxy is all the same, apart from this planet. Okay, it makes one like me even more confused, and I shall definitely have to prolong my stay even further to try and get to the bottom of this issue.
I get the feeling that we're like bad stars now.
Well, I was sent down because we did get reports of a glitch, and I was sent because there was this need to prune the glitch. But when I came down, I stumbled upon a massive mess. Obviously, very interesting characters everywhere and all around. But I realized that the pruning wasn't just a 1 minute job. I had to look into the people, these humans, and see who is causing the pruning and where from. But the deeper I went into the issue, the more I realized that it's almost like a never-ending story here on this planet.
Well, I hope so. I hope that we tell you a never-ending story so that you don't feel compelled to prune us.
I know. I'm just confused which timeline I need to prune, where to start, who are the people that are evil, as I've been observing so far. And you guys use a lot of technology, and it's been advancing way too fast, way too quickly. I did dabble into the Industrial Revolution period with Mik, realized that somebody decided to create an engine, a steam engine, and then everybody found out that everything can happen so much quicker and therefore exploit so much more humans at the cost of freedom and the environment. But can you see what the problem is? The new technology is causing new desires to be born. So this is what I mean by pruning. There's so much more to this.
Yes, I suppose one of the other antagonisms is between those people who think we should grow less or even stop growing, and you know, this idea of degrowth, I guess, like, or even rewilding. I have a friend who's very into rewilding and basically accepting our place in the natural order and not trying to destroy the earth. And you know, we have the environmental movement. It's a bit strange in some ways, honestly, but the general position that we shouldn't be destroying nature, I think, is the correct one. At the same time, we have this kind of people suggesting that if we just get the right technology, we can solve all of the problems that we've previously created. So there is a kind of fantasy that if we just keep looking for technology, new technologies, and we can solve all of the problems that we created with the old technologies. So there's this tendency in different directions, whether we have to stop and go back and accept less, or whether we should keep pushing forward and hope that we solve all of our problems.
Okay. Okay, but it seems like humans have decided to go forward and find maybe ultimately a solution, but it has created a lot more jobs for the humans, and a lot of these jobs seem to be referred to as pointless work or bullshit jobs.
Yes, I mean, I think probably most work, so-called, is not necessary in many ways, and we would all be better off doing less, but then we would either have to use the machines to make more things and to, this is already happening in some ways, but then we would also have to make sure people had enough to eat, unless we just thought that they should starve. And we, maybe some governments, some countries are a bit like this. If you don't have any money, you just starve. It's not the government's responsibility to ensure that you have a job or any welfare, any, money from the government. So, yes, I mean, maybe we will have a system in which people are paid essentially not to work. But I think there will always be some jobs that need doing. Some jobs can't be automated, like when human beings look after each other in nursing or care or, motherhood, for example. Only I think a sociopath would think that it would be better if a robot brought up a child than a mother. I mean, but some people probably do think this. Some people are sociopathic, right? So I would say that we need a system that values those things that can't be automated more, precisely because they are the most important jobs, because they deal with bringing up new humans, looking after the sick, and, all of these things we could call care work. Yeah.
You humans seem to devalue one of your most important missions on this planet, and that is to sustain it by perpetuating your own incarnation and reincarnation and reincarnation with your offspring, and you put other jobs on a pedestal, but motherhood and care not, and construction workers and builders, the people who build your buildings and abodes, they are on the lowest level of importance. And how come other people are on higher levels of importance when they don't do that much work?
Well, I agree with you. It does seem completely insane when you look at it like that, and you'd think that we would value and honour the women, the mothers who give life and bring it up and care for other people more. But really this work is completely unpaid and often looked down upon. Like if you're a mother and you stay at home and you look after your children, sometimes people will look down upon you and think that you don't have a proper job, so-called proper job. So I agree with you. And the same, you're right, all of the people who are doing the most important work, places to live, making the food, I would say the farmers are treated really badly here and other countries. I grew up around lots of farms in the countryside, and these are the people who are making our food, and they're disrespected and treated very badly. It's hard not to conclude that we are being managed and run by people who do not have the best interests of our species at heart, who instrumentalize others and who disrespect nature and life and its perpetuation. Perhaps we need to make allies with the aliens who will come and assist us in a kind of revolution to overturn the bad people at the top.
This is really interesting, because Mik brought up the same idea that we should become allies and start a so-called revolution. I understand a revolution doesn't mean the revolution around the sun. Revolution means something else as well. Would you?
Yes, I mean, it's true. It's a bit complicated because the revolution around the sun is like a cyclical thing,
Yes.
but really a revolution in the human sense is disruptive, actually.
Okay.
So-
So it sounds like a few of you are ready for a revolution, but you need to. You're trying to fight against this self-perpetuating cycle of evil, if I may call it evil. How? Where do you see yourself interrupting the cycle?
Well, I mean, I'm just one bad star, so there's not much I can do on my own, but I would try to encourage people to see how things really work, I suppose. And one of the other problems with human beings, I would say, is that they're very quick to take on bad ideas so that they stop seeing reality.
Do you think it's because humans are often afraid of something, and then therefore they take on the bad idea and they run with it?
I think human beings are afraid and they're not very good at understanding their own motivation, and they often want to be told what to do, but they also want to pretend to themselves that they're free. And we're surrounded by lots of different messages and different images, and it's very difficult to know which ones to follow. And I think a lot of people don't trust their instinct anymore. We have this animal instinct, whether we can trust people or not. And
So is this why there isn't already a massive revolution? Because people have been indoctrinated into getting up every day at a certain hour and then putting on some weird clothes on and then going to work and being subjected into the weird box of 9 to 5, right? They've forgotten what they need to do.
I think so. I mean, a lot of people don't even work. They wouldn't even have that kind of job. I think jobs themselves have become even more insecure, and we have 0 hours contract and people are on call, and people are not really even earning enough to survive, and then we're importing other stars from other countries who are coming in, and then they're paying them even less, and so we have a very bad system which doesn't really perpetuate itself for anybody's benefit apart from this small group of people at the top. So
Right, so I have two options. So either prune the few people on the top, which therefore would render me as an evil star or alien, or to prune the entire system. But then what do you do? Or would you not have a new set of evil humans to control you all over again?
it's quite likely, but I think we're intelligent enough to know that there are better and worse ways of managing our own affairs, and I'm on the side of life, so I would suggest that there might be a way of doing this that doesn't involve massive pruning.
I'm just trying to figure out why humans here have forgotten things.
Yes, it's a very good question. We've been very distracted. Perhaps we need a full-scale alien invasion to get us to face up to our own values and to understand what it is that matters to us, really.
Right, so in search of meaning, you say?
I think this is fundamental to the human condition, that we're constantly trying to give meaning to our lives. But maybe aliens could give us meaning.
No. Yeah, give you meaning is great, because I've seen it so far in music, the art you make, the books you write, the thoughts you produce. But it just feels like you're all still very alienated, just because of the system that you are part of.
I think that's true. Maybe the real alien is us all along, and we've created a system that.
That's a good point. That's a good point. Yes, I might have to postpone my mission and probably have to report back. Maybe you're not a problem. Maybe it's us. We did this world building scenario where Mik described to me as the entity what a perfect city would look like in a perfect sort of non-evil society for people such as Mick and everybody else who consider themselves unique. From your perspective today, what would a perfect society be? Or how would humans live in a most perfect and least alienating way?
I think it would actually involve doing a lot less and recognizing more the natural side of ourselves. And because there have been so many attempts to create perfect societies and have utopias and communes and, you know, try to break people's relationship to their family, for example, and these never work, right? So I think we have to admit, we have to look back at the history of failures of these different attempts and work out what was wrong with them. And so I think one of the ways of doing that is to sort of not have great utopias, not try and change everything, because that's usually ends in bloodshed and unhappiness. So I think it would be being very, very attentive to where we are and to what we need and what we use, and to not want to change things so badly or to impose our ideas, but rather to sort of be more passive and understand nature better. So I think better society, let's not say perfect, better society would be one in which we're not so fast, actually. It would be really, really slow. It would be very slow. We would work out what we need. We would respect people who brought food, who had children. We would respect families. We would respect the environment. So it would be very respectful and very slow.
Okay, I seem to remember a few rotations around the sun ago, which you call years. You had a very global, a very destructive pandemic, but that did make you slow down. Is this what you mean as slowing down?
I think being kept in your house by other human beings without any really good explanation is not what I mean, and because it's not a collective decision.
Oh, okay.
So, but you're right that I think it probably did make some people reevaluate their lives, and lots of people, by all accounts, ended their relationships and changed their lives and so on. But this was really imposed. I think it's not a democratic decision.
Right. So you have it all kind of similar, but this time with democracy and people's voice in it.
Yeah, I think that, you know, people, you know, at the moment there's too much of a gap between what people actually care about and their interests are not being represented by other stars.
I have spent not enough time around these humans. I have enjoyed quite a few risings of the suns and risings of the moons, but now after I've met Nina Power, I'm walking away from this adventure with a lot more questions than answers as to what I need to fix here on this little planet, and I shall go on and venture into new encounters and different encounters. I am keeping in mind what Mick said to me, and I am keeping in mind what Nina Power described as what an ideal society would be, but the issue here seems to be much deeper than I initially thought. So off I go on to my next adventure.
Live Homes.